How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Talk4 Podcast. So excited to have you here today and show you this fantastic episode. Just want to say quickly that episodes like this one and all the ones before and the ones in future are made possible by people who subscribe. Hopefully, just like you. I'm going to ask you today if you can leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a rating, leave a like or a comment, and just support the show in the little ways that you can like that. It makes a huge difference on my end. And quickly, just want to plug as well. I've taken 30 of the best episodes of this podcast and turned them into a fantastic book that goes into 150 secrets to greatness. Each one of those 30 episodes gets crunched down into 5 of the best key takeaways from the whole talk and turns them into a fantastic book. Highly recommend you check it out. Please support the show by grabbing a copy, either a paperback or an ebook. And I can't wait to show you guys this one today. So guys, without further ado, let's get over to the episode. How's it going, guys? Welcome to episode 159 of Talk4, the Quickfire podcast, where we ask 4 great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Skupien. That's me. Let me introduce our incredible guest for today. Russell Quinn is going to be answering our questions today. So, Russ, how you doing today? Welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you here, and we have a lot of shared passion, so it's going to be a great talk.
Well, absolutely no, Louis. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Hey, anytime it's this show is about high performance people and great leaders and people doing great work, and you certainly fit the bill for that one. I can't wait to dig into it. But we always like to kind of introduce people on the small scale first, and then we're gonna really kind of rip into it on the big scale in these 4 questions in a minute. But just to kick this off, a bit of an elevator pitch on what you've done, where you're at now, what day-to-day looks like for you, and tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from. So let's start off there, and then we're going to hit the backstory on a bigger scale right after that.
Will do, Louis. Well, thanks again. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. Look, my backstory is pretty simple, right? I have been the fortunate recipient of a lot of individual support, a lot of individual guidance, throughout my life. Whether it was at home in Salt Lake or, my time in the service. And it really starts for me with that kind of impact. My father initially, recommended, a path into the Air Force, even though there was no one in my family that, had ever been in the service. That really got me moving on that track. And certainly my time at the academy and getting into the F16 was again, individual impacts, whether it was instructors or mentors. And I'm just so grateful for it. And I really felt it when I started moving into the Air Force and moving up, whether it was weapons school or time with the team, the Thunderbird team, time in test, time in command. These are all times when leaders can really make a difference. And so what I tried to do in my life is really do the same thing, right? Find individuals that needed a help, needed some assist, needed some mentorship, and try to do the best I can to move them in that direction. And I saw that work well in business as well. When I finished my 30 years in service, I've spent the last 16 years in business, the last 8 building, the amazing Top Aces brand in the U.S. with the F16, the only commercial operator of that airplane in the world. And again, it's all, individuals making a difference. And so that's really been kind of the story of what's got me where I am, is just a lot of wonderful folks helping me out. And I've really tried to, pay that back in whatever way I can.
Absolutely. So let's look into that on kind of the bigger scale then, because I think, so much of the leadership that you've probably learned that's done you such good justice within the world of business has been the stuff that you learned and the foundations that were developed in military training and the experiences there too. So, started off in that career flying the F16, then you became a solo pilot with the USAF Thunderbirds. I'm very familiar. I love those guys. I had a recent podcast of Thunderbird one, and I know the quality, so I know that you're right up there with them. So if we dig into that a little bit then, so just take us through that Air Force career. So, where you went, what you did, And then also kind of walk us through some of the experiences that maybe shaped you as a leader in there as well. So some of the big key highlight takeaways that you feel developed and kind of helped you get those reps to become a great leader and succeed in business after that too. And just generally becoming a Thunderbird and the experience there. So a whole lot about that career and the things you picked up along the way would be a great place to dig into this thing.
No, that'd be a lot of fun to talk about. I think Sheik was your most recent Thunderbird one. I know you had Astro on here too. Two great examples of the kind of folks. Mace, I think you talked to Mace as well, right?
Hell yeah.
These are the kind of folks you have on the team. Just great individuals. But yeah, so I started. I went to pilot training at the Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training. It's a very unique pilot training place because it's all young men and women from the NATO countries. And the great thing about it is the instructors there are also from all the NATO countries. So we had pick your country, right? We had an instructor there. And so that was a great melting pot and a wonderful place to learn, as a young mid-20-year-old Air Force officer. But, after the F-16 there, I went to Japan, spent a whole lot of time in the Pacific, 4 years in Japan, over to Korea, back to Japan. And it was during that time that I really learned a lot about the F-16, of course, a lot about tactics, a lot about teaching. Attended the Air Force Weapons School, which I think you're familiar with as well. And it was on my last tour in Japan is where I got selected for the team. And again, that experience was incredible, right? It just, particularly as a solo pilot and as an F-16 pilot, there's just so many things you can do with that airplane to demonstrate not just what the airplane can do, of course, but what the Air Force can do. And so, having that experience was great. I mean, we could talk all day about that. But when I left there, I went into the test business, and I think you talked to Astro a little while ago. Astro's a unique guy. He was a developmental test guy from the test pilot community and an operational test guy from the 422nd at Nellis. And it was the operational test side is where I was, working new weapons, new tactics. And again, as a weapons officer, that is the kind of thing you really want to do. And so I did a couple tours there, a little more time in Korea, and then over to Luke Air Force Base to teach a basic course, and then over to Germany to command a couple different units there. But again, throughout all that, each one of those, we'll just call them evolutions, right? There was always one individual that kind of took me aside and said, "Hey, Russ, weapons school might be, where you want to go. Hey, this Thunderbird thing is something you ought to consider. Hey, the test business is maybe a place where you could do well." And then, of course, command tours are always, quite competitive, of course. But, you bring your credibility, you bring the leadership that you've shown to each of those opportunities. So, along the way, along those paths, there was a fair amount of leadership laboratory going on, both leadership and followership, of course. And so when I finally decided to hang it up after 30 years, I knew I wanted to go back into business and do my very best to try to succeed in that path. A lot of those leadership lessons, a lot of the mindset that says, let's help others. It really served me well there. And again, so I've spent the last 7 years building the brand here in the U.S. With Top Aces. In fact, I just handed over the executive role to the new guy in April. So I'm now the chief growth officer, just focusing on purely growth-related activities. But think about how much fun it has been to take everything you learn in the service and all those leadership and everything, of course, revolving around the jet, because it's a great airplane.
Yeah,
a lot of fun to be around. But taking all of that to be able to build really from the ground up a company that is, it is a trust-based company, it is a value-based company. And so to be able to recruit the kind of quality individuals we need has really been a joy. And that's what's made the difference in the success of the organization is, we've got incredible maintainers, we've got incredible aviators, and the support staff as well. So it's really the culmination, really the apex for me of a whole lot of time, really just kind of learning and doing my very best to represent. So it's been a real joy.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. So before we jet off into the current things that you're up to and we dig into all of that and leave, the career path behind, I'd just like to linger on the Thunderbirds for a minute and just see if there's any big old
Sure.
stories that you want to share from there too. So any massively adrenaline pumping moments that you experienced in the Thunderbirds, or any kind of great memories that you had there from good performances. And if you want to tie a bit of something in there as well for people to take away from it as well, a lot of mental preparation, for high performance situations that are very visible to the public, which
Yeah,
I'm sure relates to what you're doing now. So, any great memories and tied in there a couple of lessons, maybe too?
absolutely. Well, I mean, amazing memories, right? So I'll start with when I first went over to apply to the team, right? So by then I had about 1,000 hours in the airplane, was very comfortable in the jet, and so I did not anticipate that the flying piece of the job would be that challenging. But when I went out to apply, there's obviously a flying piece to the application, right? To see, how well you fly and how well you operate the airplane. And I was in the back seat. The lead solo at the time was in the front seat. And I recall vividly, Louis, when we closed up the formation, right? Because the distance between the airplanes was so incredibly unnatural. And I mean, you've seen this, right? You flew with the Patriots. I think you flew with the Baltic Beast. So you know what that looks like. But, imagine just, my comfort level in formation was quite high, but there was always a normal distance, right? There's nothing normal about this. And so I vividly remember thinking to myself, dude, you're nuts if you think you're going to be able to fly that close to another airplane, doing all the things that you do. And so
Yeah.
it was a very impactful moment for me because it made me step back and go, hey, is this the kind of work you really want to do just from a flying perspective? And of course, I decided absolutely. Think of the challenge, think of the opportunity to represent the Air Force, and so I continue to move forward. And fortunately, was selected, and so that was very impactful. Just the difference in the flying piece. And there's two other pieces that I think I'd like to chat about. And the first is just the incredible tightness of the organization, right? You're on the road. It's like a NASCAR schedule if you're familiar, right? It's March to November. You're gone every weekend. These are the folks that you eat, sleep. I mean, you are with all these individuals pretty much the entire year. And so you get to know people very, very well and make incredibly close friendships. In fact, my opposing solo, my second year, is still one of my closest friends. We chat quite often. And so the relationships that we built were just absolutely wonderful. And really, there's a lot of pride, and I think a lot of the folks that have been on the Blues and the Thunderbirds will tell you, when you're out there doing the job, you obviously want to do the very best you can, but to be able to represent the service, in our case, the Air Force, and the men and women that are out there doing the great work that they're doing, it's just a very, very unique opportunity and really quite rewarding. And it goes to your point about, are you able to inspire young folks and show them what it really means to be part of an organization like that? And so for me personally, it was a very special time. But it's not just in the U.S. The team travels internationally quite often, and I was on the team in '95, '96, and once again, for folks that may not be aware, that was still kind of the walls coming down, Eastern Europe's opening up, and so we spent time in Bulgaria, Romania, countries where the Thunderbirds had never been before. And I vividly remember visiting a hospital in Romania together with mods with my opposing solo. And there was an older gentleman there in the hospital, and when he found out who we were, he looks up at us and he says, we've been waiting for you for 45 years. So you can imagine how impactful that is, to see someone who lived through the challenges in Eastern Europe back in the 40s, and here we are, standing, red, white, and blue, representing, what at that time was, the U.S. in 95 and 96. It was very impactful. So the representational piece of the job, I always found, well, it was just a joy. It was an absolute joy.
Absolutely. I can only imagine. So I got a question for you. So a bit of current topic before we move on to everything you've done after this too. So it's a little quick one, but I saw a post yesterday. The Thunderbirds have taken on Samuel Raz Larson, and I got to do a project with this guy, and he was the F-22 demo team pilot and commander, and they've just taken
Oh,
him on
right.
as Thunderbird 8. And I thought, you know what, because you're a former Thunderbird, I want to ask you this question because it is current as well, but a guy like Raz, industry favorite almost, F-22 Raptor demo pilot, known for, being just exceptional, going from a single ship demonstration team into a big organization team like the Thunderbirds, how do you think that's going to challenge him, and how do you think he's going to do?
Well, I think he's going to do great, right? I've never met him, but I've heard wonderful things about him. But here's where his unique talent, I believe, will make such a difference, right? The Thunderbird 8 position is so incredibly critical to the success of every show site because he's the first one in, right? He's got his crew chief in the back, and he's the individual who sets up all the show details for every show every weekend, right? So, where most of us get Wednesday off and we deploy on Thursday, he flies out on Wednesday so that when we all roll in on Thursday, everything is set up and good to go. So honestly, his experience having set up show sites before, he probably knows, the vast majority of the folks that he's going to be dealing with, and they of course know him. He's bringing an incredible amount of both credibility and personality, being the person that he is. That is the perfect place for him to help the team succeed, I believe. And he'll fit right in with the team. It's interesting when you apply for the Thunderbirds, because everyone who applies is an incredibly talented aviator, right? Generally speaking, by the time you meet the minimums, the flying piece you should be able to do. It's really what the team is trying to do, and I saw this when we hired the teams that followed me. What we're trying to do is find individuals who will work together, who match well together. Their personalities are giving personalities. Every team tries to find that. So no, it's not a surprise at all to me that they put him in the number 8 spot. That's perfect for him. And honestly, he's going to help the team be even more successful.
That's awesome. I completely agree. He's going to do a great job. That is the perfect
Yeah.
person for the role. So let's dig into the incredible career that you had after the Air Force then as well. So you transitioned out of the military sector into the private sector. How did you kind of navigate that shift then, I guess, from the military aviation world to the business world? What challenges kind of came as a result of that, going into a corporate environment? And how did those military experiences and time out there sort of help you kind of overcome and face those challenges too? So any difficulties and all that?
Yeah, the biggest difficulty was just, culturally, right? 30 years in the Air Force, the culture in the Air Force well, it's a military culture, right? It's very hierarchical. You kind of always know where you are in terms of just about everything structurally, and business just isn't that way, and it's not that it's that way for a reason, right? It's just simply the way it is. So, cultural transition was a bit challenging for me, but again, I was very fortunate because particularly when I was working with a company called L3 at the time. It's L3 Harris now, but I had an individual. He was an Army tank driver, in fact, in Desert Storm. He's an Aggie, great guy, and he was a wonderful mentor to me. He really helped me a lot in terms of understanding the business piece of things, what it is the organization is really looking for from me. Because a lot of times when military individuals join, just call it a general defense business, what they're really looking for out of us is what you just call subject matter expertise, right? There are a lot of really brilliant engineers out there making our Air Force and making the DoD better, or the ministry in the UK. There are a lot of smart people out there trying to make the defense industry better and provide the men and women in uniform the tools that they need. A lot of times where we can help, where prior military can help, is as a subject matter expert to sit down with them and say, okay, understand what you're trying to do here. Let me tell you how that actually works in the airplane, how you could maybe make that a little bit better, maybe even try to do it a little bit more economically, or if you need to make it a little more high tech, what the cost of that is. And so it's navigating through that subject matter expertise and how you bring that I'll just call it tactical credibility into the business world. But again, I had a wonderful mentor who kind of walked me through a lot of that. And when I had questions, I sit down with them over a couple of beers and kind of say, okay, here's what I just experienced. What do you think? So again, individuals make a big difference, and they certainly have for me. Um, the leadership piece was really quite natural. People are people; they want to be heard. In fact, who was the gentleman that you just had? Dr. Luarca,
Yeah,
Lewis.
Lewis Loaki. Yeah.
Leadership.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to what he's spot on. People just want to be heard; they want to be acknowledged, and that's the same in the military as it is in industry. So that those kind of leadership lessons are quite important, and they flow very very seamlessly across the service. When I got into top aces, it was a little bit trickier though, right? Because L3, big defense organization, very financially successful, they're doing fine, right? When you start working a startup and you're counting every penny and you're bringing on, people one at a time, trying to build something, that's a whole different, from a business perspective, that's a whole different ball of wax. And so I had to learn very, very quickly, about finances in particular, where the money's going, how we track it. And when you build the foundation of a company, it's really built on people. The airplanes themselves, kind of take care of themselves if you've got great maintainers and great pilots. So that was a very different path for me, very challenging, honestly, to learn the money piece of it. Because in the end, it's a private equity company. Money matters a lot, where it's tracked, how it's worked, what the profit margin looks like. But you still, obviously, most importantly, have to be safe. And again, that all just goes back to people. But been very, very happy with where Top Aces is. We've been flying under contract now with the F16 for well over 3 years. The enterprise itself is amazing, right? It's a 25-year company. It was founded by a couple of Hornet pilots up in Canada, and they've been doing Adversary in Canada for 20 years, in Germany for over 10. We've flown with the Dutch, the Italians, the Australians, and the F-16 here in the U.S. So it is a very well-established company, great safety record, and a lot of that, again, is just due to the leadership and the way we hire. So, aviation's I say often, right? Fighter aviation is a credibility business, whether you're in the service or whether you're not, and you bring that credibility every day. And so, who's working on the airplane and who's flying it? It really makes a monumental difference, and we've been very, very fortunate in Top Aces to get some great folks.
I can see that. I mean, you're one of them, and I've been obviously taking my time to look at the company and just the fleet and everything, and the people in charge and where it came from. It's an incredible, incredible company. Let's dig into that a bit then. So I feel like we should give a couple of minutes really just to what Top Ace is all about and how that works. Then, so you're Chief Growth Officer. If we sort of look into a bit of like the mission statement of the company, so how does that all work then? So how does the services, how does that get applied? How, who's it being applied to? What does it look like? How does it impact military readiness? And just tell us all about it really. So your role and the company, what it does.
Now, those are really great questions, Louis. So let me talk about the company first, and then I'll get kind of deeper into where we are, right, as it relates to the different services. So the company itself, when you think about Top Aces, when I say we're a trust-based company, that's exactly what I mean, right? When we as leaders of this organization think about trust, we think about trust with our employees, we think about trust with our leadership, we think trust obviously with our customer, right? Whether that's a ministry in Canada, the Luftwaffe in Germany, the Department of Defense in the US, they need to trust that we're going to fly safely, that we're going to schedule and deliver. But it's also trust with our investors, right? You can imagine the investment required to, get a fleet of 29 F-16s or a fleet of, 14 A4s or even more Alpha jets and Lear jets, right? It's a lot of money. And so, the trust piece of the company is something that we always keep in front to make sure that we're addressing concerns whether it's employees, leadership, investors, just to make sure that the comm flow is appropriate, right? And it matters a lot. Value-based, service, excellence, integrity. These are things that are at the core of who we are. But all of that, wrapped around all of that, is the safety record of the company, right? It is not an easy thing to fly trainers and fighters commercially. Because, again, when you're a service, you have a lot of manpower. You generally have a fair amount of resources. That is not the case, right? And whether we're talking Raven or ATAC or Tech, all of us in the industry, we all take safety incredibly, incredibly seriously. And so, again, it's been a real joy for me as a longtime F-16 person in the leadership role to make sure that the F-16 specifically, we're focused very much on safety because, there's a long history in this airplane, well over 40 years of places where, you can get tripped up with safety with the F-16. And so it's been one of my greatest joys to be able to kind of make sure I'm plus or minus 60 in the operation to make sure we stay in lanes and keep the safety piece going. They're certainly doing the same thing in Canada, same thing in Germany as well. So that's the company. When it comes to the customers in Canada, in 2018, they received a 10-year contract to provide Adversary Air for the Royal Canadian Air Force. So they've been flying the Alpha Jet against the CF-18 up there for quite some time and doing a wonderful job. About 10 years ago, we got our first contract in Germany. We're flying Alpha Jets and A4s over there against the different fleets in the Luftwaffe. And then, of course, in the F-16 here, we're flying primarily against the Air Force, but we also help train the Marine Corps at Cherry Point. We've done a number of deployments as well. And then we've done some other temporary things. Like, for example, we just finished a trial with the Dutch Air Force, with the Royal Netherlands Air Force, with the Italian Air Force, and and as I mentioned, we've done some work down in Australia as well. So each of those air forces, right, as they look at how they train, what they've discovered is it is much more economical to launch, I'll just use the Air Force as an example, to launch Top Aces F-16s versus F-35s than it is to launch F-35s versus F-35s, right? And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Preservation of the fleet is one, cost of flying is another. But the other real important piece of this, Louis, is the technology that we're bringing, right? So we have an open mission system in the airplane. We put an E-scan radar in the nose and a bunch of other relatively high-tech things that we can put on the F-16 in this open mission system, helmet-mounted queuing system, and infrared search and track. And all of this is open mission. So we can add or subtract whatever the customer wants. But who's operating that? Well, the individual operating that is, generally speaking, probably a 20 to 25-year flyer, 3,000 hours of flying time, well over 1,000 instructor time. So the folks that we hire, the men and women that we hire, are very, very experienced at doing what they're doing. And they're very teaching focused, right? Picture this, right? So you're a brand new F-35 pilot at Luke Air Force Base. You're out doing your syllabus mission against, a Top Aces F-16. You get in the debrief, which of course is the most important part of the flight. You want to have someone in there who can kind of dissect what happened. That individual needs to know the threat that you're trying to simulate. They need to be able to teach it. They need to be able to fly it. And they need to be able to do it in a way that is humble, right? And approachable and credible. And so these are the kind of qualities that we look for in our aviators. So that's really the key is the operators that are interacting. And of course, what are they supported by? An amazing maintenance team, most of whom have been working on the F-16 for, again, 10, 20 years.
Yeah. Did you think that, you must have had a last flight in the F-16, right? When you were in the military, did you think that was it? I'm going to be boots on the ground and flying flipping Cessnas and maybe something decent every now and then? Or did you kind of know you were going to go into this and then you're going to end up basically flying the Viper again later down the line? That must have been a great day when you got back in the jet, right?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't get back in the jet, right? I didn't. Here's the reason why, right? So I flew the F-16 continually from January 1987 all the way to 2007, right? I never stopped. And again, that was kind of a unique career because generally speaking, you'll go off to school or you'll do something else. But Trust me, man. When I got in that airplane in '87 the first time, I didn't ever want to get out of it. And the only reason, honestly, the only reason I got out of it is they promoted me and told me to go to school in Australia, and I thought, well, okay, I'll go to school in Australia and not fly anymore. But yeah, I really thought when I finished flying in 2007 that would probably be it. I thought a lot when I stood up top aces about whether I should be flying or whether I should be running the show. And what I discovered, Louis, was the level of talent, the level of study, that and this is my expectation as the boss of the as the leader of the F16 piece of this. This is what we expect of you as an aviator, and we've got incredible aviators. Vast majority of them are 10 or more years younger than me, and the reality is this is where they are. This is where I would have been, right? Because I've been out of the jet too long. Even though I had plenty of time, I felt like I could do a lot more for the company, as the president, making sure that we kept things on the track and hand off that tactical credibility piece to the men and women who wanted to come fly for us. And it worked really well, right? They're a fantastic group of folks. I could not keep up with them in the air. Guarantee you. Guarantee you.
Oh man, that's great. Here's a good question for you then that I really want to know about top aces. So what I'm seeing right now and what we know in the military landscape is that things are evolving constantly. Some of my conversations recently, very test and development focused at Edwards, talking about, new jets coming through, the F-47 and stuff too.
Yeah.
There's clearly an evolving landscape here too, and things eventually become obsolete, right? Or they just become outdated generally. So I'm just curious to see, how's top aces staying ahead of the curve in a situation like this then? So with the technology, with the jets and what you see in the future for the company as well, how do you kind of see the strategy evolving for the company to, stay at the top of the food chain really in this industry, which is essentially where you guys appear to be right now, and, keep ultra relevant for the new generations of jets coming through as well to provide this adversary training for?
Well, it's critical, right? I mean, if we're going to survive as a company and we're going to, remain, as you said, at the top of the food chain to make this happen, the technology piece of it is critical. And again, this is where I'm just so proud of the work that the engineers have done and our partners have done, because it's not just top aces, right? There are a number of partners that we work very, very closely with to bring the kind of advanced capability that we need to bring. And I'll mention two separate ones, right? So I mentioned we have an open mission system in the airplane, which means we have a separate mission computer in the jet that we can integrate different things to. Again, I mentioned the E-scan radar and a number of other things. Most recently, we brought forward what we call an autonomous constructive wingman. So what this is this is the software in the airplane, AI controlled with one of our partners, to where we can actually put a constructive wingman on the link that blue, again, we're red, that blue can see and has to target and manipulate against. So if we're out there with only one F-16, we can put constructive wingmen on the link so that we look like 3 or 4 or more entities. And those entities are quite real on the link, and they would need to be handled by the F-35 or the F-22 pilot. And again, these are AI controlled, right? So the great thing about AI is, and particularly we're seeing it in the fighter world, AI is a quick learner, right? Learns tactics quickly, takes commands quite quickly. And so what we're able to do in our airplane is through what we call PVI, pilot vehicle interface, which is the stick and the throttle. So each of those buttons can do different things. And so we can tell this constructive wingman, what it is we want him to do in terms of tactics. And to your question about, going forward, so what that does, that's a constructive wingman. But now what we have in the airplane is the ability, and again, AI controlled, to actually go to true live constructive wingman. So you go out there with a single top aces F-16, and maybe you're controlling 2 or more, collaborative combat aircraft, they call them CCAs. And those are acting in a way that we want them to act. And why are we doing that? Well, we're doing that because currently, our adversaries have that, our high-end adversaries have that capability. And so we, as a company trying to do what you just said, continue to provide the kind of readiness training the Air Force needs, we need to be ready to do that. And so we're well on our way to no kidding control and live CCAs, from the cockpit of our F-16s. And again, who's doing all this, right? These are our partners. These are some really, really smart engineers, and a lot of folks, getting in the room going, how are we going to make this happen in a way that is business focused, right? Doesn't break the bank. We can do it in a way that doesn't cost, crazy amounts of money.
Definitely. So give us your golden nugget or nuggets on trust then, because that is where it's all at now. The more I think about this, I think, okay, so you got to stay at the top of the food chain. How do you do that? You need relevant hardware to compete with. How do you get that? You need the trust to get the access, right? So as a company, some companies, I mean, I think everyone relies on trust to some large degree and stuff, but Top Aces has to have trust. It is essential to the business, and it's evident because, getting hold of those F-16s, getting that contract, that just doesn't happen normally. It's a first of its kind, as you said. So in terms of building trust with customers, even, dealing with something like this and building a relationship with the governments and military and stuff, what can we take away from that? Like, what do you guys think is most important to maintaining that trust, from the operational side, but also to the kind of, I guess you could say customer relations side too? What are the big ones there and things that we can take away from it and apply?
It's transparency. It's just transparency, right? That's the trick. We're governed, Louis. The operation of these F-16s is governed by a number of different government agencies, right? These are previous foreign military assets that were sold to Israel, right? And we bought them back. And so the State Department, the U.S. State Department, they have a say, right, on how we operate these airplanes. And so when we first imported them, the State Department said, okay, Russ, here's the rules, right? And you need to report on these rules every year, which of course we do. And I talk to the State Department every month, making sure that we maintain that trusting relationship. This is going well. This isn't going well. What do we need to modify? And so that's a very important relationship. There's a security clearance that comes with the company. Also a very important relationship, right? The folks that monitor that. That goes across the spectrum of the industry, of course. But again, very important. When you think about airworthiness, right? The FAA cares, right? We're the only F-16s operating commercially. So the FAA cares a lot about how we maintain the airplanes, what kind of inspections we do, what kind of structural integrity. And then the Air Force has their own process. It's called the military flight release. And they do their own inspections as well. And so throughout the process, through all of these agencies, transparency is key to building trust. And so when they come in to see us, we let them know, here's what we're doing. Here's where, this needs to change. This needs to change. We need your help here. And actually, it's gone very, very well. It's one of the reasons why, and I would submit the primary reason why, that things have gone so well for us as the only operator of the F-16. Is because we are very transparent with the folks that keep an eye on us. And then in the end, when we think about the customer, and the customer being the, that student at Luke or that student at Eglin or Cherry Point, when that individual is getting ready to fly, and you've seen what it takes, right, just to get ready for one sortie, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of study. And so when they schedule Top Aces and they expect to see an F-16 out in the airspace, doing what they're supposed to do, we need to show up and we need to be ready to do it in a professional way, the way that is expected. And again, we've got the highest military, mission capability rate in the industry. And so what that means is when they schedule us, we're going to show up. We're going to do what they want done. We've got a maintenance team that can make it happen. And so across the spectrum, that's what makes the difference for us. And again, what does it come down to? It all comes down to people.
Yeah. But also, potentially the, I wouldn't say downfall, but I could say, heavy impact on the company could also come down to the people. So there's a really important thing to hit on here, I think, as well. So, when you think about the maintainers and stuff too, you guys have got this great, immaculate safety record right now too, which is a massive foundation to that trust and that reliability to show up and do the job well. if there was a mistake or a crash or an issue, that would have a massive impact, not just financially, but also just on the future projections of,
Yeah,
acquiring contracts and, that reliability and that safety thing, that's, yes, a bit more tricky then. So actually, the future of the company, the weight of that actually rests on everyone's shoulders there, all the way
it
down to the
does.
maintainers and the mechanics
Yeah.
and the people behind the scenes. So I guess the difference between what you guys have versus what the military had is, in the military, there is an ultra strict, clear chain of command, right? Whereas in the company, you can have that, but it has to be developed and enforced, maybe a lot harder. So, how do you do that? How do you keep a good chain of command and make sure that everyone down to the ground floor and the most basic jobs is doing a great job at a company where it's a bit different from the structure of a military organization?
Yeah. So think of the military, Louis. When you think about the military, just take a standard F-16 squadron, right? Maintenance group. You have a bunch of young men and women who maybe just joined, right? They just went through tech school and they're just learning, right? Eager, but they don't have that base knowledge. And then you've got some upper level, mid-level non-commissioned officers who've maybe been in the Air Force for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Maybe they've been working on the jet the whole time. Maybe they transitioned from another airplane. Then you have some higher level non-commissioned officers, that are all, generally very seasoned, right? 12, 13 or more years. And so the Air Force structure is built to where we can build the young men and women that are young and teach them while we continue to generate sorties, right? It's very important to the success of the Air Force and the Navy is the same way, pick your service. And top aces, pretty much generally speaking, the individuals who join our company are all of those folks that are, 12, 13, 20, 25 years of maintenance experience, right? So when we walk into a base with, and we put 6 F-16s on the line, those 6 F-16s are being maintained by individuals that have got decades of F-16 experience, right? And so it's a different structure. And so those individuals that have been doing this for a long time, you're absolutely right. They have a tremendous amount more weight on their shoulders, right, than someone in the service, because again, there's different levels of experience. What we have found is we're able to get the kind of mission capable rates we want because of the experience and the professionalism of the maintenance corps. These men and women that work for us they've been there, right? They've deployed. They know what it feels like. They know what it means to hold that safety in their heart. They know what it means to make sure that a jet is safe when it takes off, and then when it comes down broken, to fix it the right way, so that everything's fine on the other side. So it's really, the answer to your question, I believe, really comes with the experience level and just the attitude that the folks at Top Aces have. Because, trust me, we're certainly on the F-16 side, right? We're a little less than 200 folks, right? That's what we've built to. The enterprise itself is well over 600 folks, and easily half, if not more, of those are folks working line maintenance, supply, heavy maintenance, doing phase inspections and those kind of things. So we are very, very blessed to have an incredibly experienced maintenance corps, and I think that's what makes the difference in terms of the difference from what you're talking about in a military organization.
Absolutely. So what does day to day look like there then? So can you just tell me a little bit about like where the base is exactly? How many
Yeah.
sorties are you doing? Are the sorties dependent on the contracts and the kind of jobs that you're getting and things you have to do? How much flying's going on? How much maintenance is going on? What does your training look like? Just some of the stuff that goes on around there, really, like a week schedule.
Sure. Well, in Canada, we are located at 6 different places, right? And Canada, a huge country, right? Like the U.S. Then we are very well established for well over 15 years, and we're flying 15, 16 different jets. Depends on what the Royal Canadian Air Force needs. But I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we're probably turning 10 to 15 sorties a day up there, at the heaviest time. The German contract's a little bit different, because what the German government said to us is, hey, we want jet availability. We want 4 A4s and 2 Alpha jets, for an example, and then we'll let you know what we're going to do with them. Sometimes they're in an exercise and we're launching everything. And other days, we're only launching a couple. But again, what they're looking for is availability so that they have flexibility to train the way they want. What we just recently did with the Dutch and the Italians was a very, very concentrated effort. So, that's generally 2 or 3 or even 4 times 4, right? So 2 goes a day, working those kind of things. In the U.S., at Luke and at Eglin, we're flying anywhere from 4 to 6 sorties a day. A lot of that depends on whether we do what's called hot pit refueling. So we'll go fly a couple sorties. We won't shut the engine down. We'll just fill it full of gas and go fly again. Or we're the only company that's able to air refuel off of KC-46 and KC-135 tankers. So there are days when we'll launch 4 sorties, and that'll turn into 8 because we hit a tanker in between and we just never landed, right? F-35s will go down, the next group will come out. So it really varies a lot depending on what it is the customer's looking for. I guess the only other example I'll bring is Red Flag, right? So Red Flag is the big exercise, the big war game that happens at Nellis. We've supported Red Flag 3 different times now, put 6 jets on the ramp, and generally that's a 4-turn 4. We do the same thing for the test organizations there when they ask us to come out. So those are the kind of numbers that we're kind of working across the enterprise. And then what's supporting that? Well, there's a what's called a phase inspection, right? Think of it like a 50,000 mile checkup on your car, right? For the F-16, it happens every 250 hours, which is about once a year. And so once a year, we have to bring every airplane in the fleet, and of course we stair step it out so that we don't have them all on the ground at the same time. But that's a very intensive inspection. That happens in Mesa, Arizona, at Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. That's where our headquarters are in the U.S. Canada does it up in Bagotville. Our German folks do it in either Nordholz or Wittmann. And so there's heavy maintenance centers for each of the airplanes to do these phase inspections, because every airplane has to have one. And then there are other things that we're doing. For example, we're continually bringing more F-16s to the fleet. We're up to number 15 right now, 15 of the 29 that we have. So we're continually building airplanes as well, and Canada's doing that with the Alpha Jet and the A4 as well. So there's a lot of heavy maintenance going on, not just the line work.
I can see that. I think a lot of this comes down to leadership too. So we spoke a lot there about how it comes down to the maintainers and the people behind the scenes who are doing these things, and there's a lot of weight resting their shoulders. But ultimately, it's one of those things. I think actually, you mentioned Lewis Lavarca's episode. Yeah, we spoke a lot about this too, how, you go into a company and you sort of adapt to the environment slightly. So you could be the best flippant maintainer in the world who's got 25 years of experience in F-16. But if you come into a company that's got dead energy and lackluster leadership, ultimately you are going to become part of that environment too, and your standards are going to lapse, right? Unless you are some flippant mental, strong person who's got unreal discipline.
Or you're going to leave, right?
Or you're going to leave.
Absolutely. And go find somewhere else. Yeah.
My point is, it comes to the leadership a lot, and you got to keep the environment going, and you got to make the place a great place to work, exciting, engaging, and also not just community driven, but accountable as well. So in terms of leadership and stuff within the company and doing a great job there, what are some of those key things that you want to kind of let our listeners know today to that work in creating a great high performance culture, and some of the most effective things that you could tell us about when it comes to just high performance leadership in an environment that is essentially very high stakes?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to address that. It certainly starts at the top, right? Anybody will tell you that, right? It starts at the top. We're fortunate in Top Aces in the enterprise in that our CEO is one of the founders. Right, so he was one of the 3 F-18 pilots that founded the company over 25 years ago, and he's been running it since that time. And he's a fantastic example of a fighter pilot that has really adapted well to both the entrepreneurial piece of standing up, but also the business piece of it, right? And so he really has, in a sense, he kind of has our back when it comes to a lot of the higher end business board relation kind of things that you would expect, right? But still very engaged in employee retention, certainly as it relates to, are we talking to folks? We do a survey every 6 months, and he's got a direct line to him, just like I did, in the U.S. piece. We certainly, the German leaders the same way, right? There's got to be a direct line to leadership. My kind of my technique, and maintainers are awesome, right? Get on the flight line with maintainers, and generally speaking, my pitch to them is, when I sit down and talk to people, I just ask them, I go, look, what's pissing you off? What's really making you mad? What are you seeing that's not working? And a lot of times, it's very, very simple. It's very, very simple solutions, but no one's ever asked the question, right? No one's ever said, what's pissing you off? And it could be just, I need 36 of these little rivets that, help me do this and that and here and there. And I can't seem to get the darn things. And then, next thing at the higher levels, we can solve those problems quite easily. The other thing that I think really is telling is recruitment, right? Because again, as I speak to people about recruiting, my pitch to them is, we want people just like you, right? We want people that you've deployed with. We want people that that your friends that you worked engines with, or structures, or egress, or on the aviator side, same thing. We want folks that you were aggressors with, or you deployed with, people that you trust, people that think like you. And so what we found is that the recruiting piece really tells us a lot, right? Think about the perspective I have as I look across the company. If I'm seeing my employees, and Paul would think the same thing as the CEO, if I'm seeing my employees bringing in their folks, people that think like them and have the same standards that they have, thinking to themselves, this is an individual that would fit in our culture, it screams positive, right? Because who wouldn't want to bring someone that they enjoy being with into an environment that they enjoy being in? So we watch that very, very closely because, again, it tells us a lot. So again, leadership's important, certainly, but followership is also important. The teams working together across similar lines is important. So it really is. I just call it a full spectrum look, and we have to keep it. It never stops, right? It never stops, because flying never stops. And so it's something that we monitor continuously and do our very best to continue to support.
Russ, that hits the mark perfectly. And it's so clear you've just had the best time in your career. You've done a whole different load of things, but you've done the best of them, and you've done a fantastic job at doing what you do in a different spectrum of the environment, essentially. And it's really, really impressive. I think it would be a nice place to go now, before we kind of think about wrapping this up. Just, what are you most proud of? It's a big career, like I said, different places you've been, different things you've done. What makes you most proud? And I guess as well, any hints towards the future for you as well? I think if one thing's clear, it's that you can pivot, and you can do it very successfully, and make the best of any environment that you're put in. But you've got this great career and great experience behind you to excel at whatever that is. So what do you think it's going to be? You sticking around for a while in Top Aces? And what would you like to do in the future?
Well, first of all, it's very kind of you to say, Louis. Again, I have been given a lot of opportunities by people who believed in me. And honestly, I'm most proud of the fact that I've tried to do that for other folks as well. One of the joys that one of the true joys that you really get as both a commander in the military and as a leader in business is, when you see folks that maybe worked for you, call it 5, 10, 15 years later, and you're able to sit down with them and reflect on the time, and and they share with you the impact that maybe your leadership or your decisions had on them personally, on their career, or most importantly to me, on their family. That is by far, for me, something that I'm most proud of, and because that's what folks have done for me. So I feel really good when those conversations happen. The great thing about staying in the defense industry is you have an opportunity to see a lot of folks that you've worked with before, and so you have an opportunity to have those conversations, and it's really wonderful. Hey, look, I'll stick around and help Top Aces as long as they'll have me. Honestly, I love this organization. I love the people. It's really wonderful to be able to to do some unique things, whether it's finding, more airplanes and engines, or, working closely with government agencies, to try to move the company forward, having a unique experience base, all the while, right, supporting Steve, the new leader of the U.S. Peace, and obviously Paul, the CEO. It's always great as a leader to have somebody you can call and go, hey, here's what's happening. Did that happen to you? Or, do you have any thoughts? And so, as long as that trust-based relationship continues, which I'm sure it will, I'm happy to be part of the company as long as they'll have me, because it's got a great future. It's certainly invested in the kind of things we spoke about technology-wise. The people are fantastic. And I really, and again, much like Popeye said, I really believe in the industry. Commercial adversary air, not just in the U.S., but across a number of different services, it's a very economical way to provide some very, very good training. So very optimistic about the future.
I can imagine. Russ, it's been a big career. There's been a lot that you've done and a lot of experiences, and you've had some of the best ones in my view, and you're still living it right now. But we always like to ask this towards the end of the podcast, and I think it's just such a relevant question because it relates to other people as well. But really, it's just you to you. So, if you had a minute to go back and give a little bit of advice to the young you, so let's say, kind of when you started to figure out what life is, 12, 13, 14, something along those lines, when, you got this whole big future ahead of you, not knowing what's coming, but now you've lived through a lot of it. You've picked up a lot of lessons along the way. If you could condense that into, a minute or a couple of minutes of what you would say to that young you and whisper in the ear, what would that look like?
Probably two things. The first would be make sure you're the hardest worker in the room.
And don't go to the Navy. Air Force.
That's right. And don't go to the Navy. Be the hardest worker in the room. And honestly, there's things out there you may not know about, right? You got to keep an open mind. You always got to keep an open mind. I had absolutely no idea that I was going to be a fighter pilot. I had no idea. I had no idea the opportunity even existed. Until, again, one individual said, hey, Russ, think about this. And then another individual will help me get, one other place. So keep an open mind and be the hardest worker in the room. Those would be probably the two biggest pieces of advice.
Nice. I really like it. All right, let's roll into the shameless plug then. So this always used to be just about, links and social media and websites and things like that too, but it's kind of evolved a bit as well. So it's your kind of promotion few minutes really, but that could be anything from essential reading materials, so anything that's really benefited you along the way that you want people to go and take a look at, or it's, great books or even, podcasts or whatever that might be. That can be website links to learn more and find out more, kind of go a bit deeper into everything that you're up to over there at Top Aces. Anything kind of on the personal front for LinkedIn or anything there where you want to connect with people. Really just anything that you want people to take a look at off the back of this podcast, and definitely throw some shameless plugs in there too.
No, thanks, Lou. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this, and good on you for for thinking about that. So there's actually two organizations that I'd really encourage folks to look at. And the first is called Tailwinds Ranch. Tailwinds Ranch is run by Bart and Michelle Weed. Bart and I flew F-16s together in a number of different places. And when he and Michelle retired, they opened up Tailwinds Ranch, which is it's an equine therapy center for military first responders that have PTSD or moral injury experience. And the equine therapy that Michelle specifically does has done some amazing things. Tailwinds Ranch, it's in Virginia. I really recommend you take a look at what they're doing, because they are making a monumental difference to a lot of folks that need it. And the second one, sincerely, would be the Falcon Foundation. So the Falcon Foundation, what it does is it provides scholarships to young men and women coming out of high school that might need a little help before they go to a service academy. And the reason that's important to me, Louis, is I went to a prep school because I had to go to a prep school before I could get into the Air Force Academy. I'd had okay grades, but I needed a little bit of a hand, right? And the Air Force prep school gave me that hand. The Falcon Foundation provides scholarships for young men just like me, just like I was all those years ago, that might need a little bit of help academically, and they provide scholarships to civilian prep schools, and then opportunities to go into service academy, and not just the Air Force Academy, but Naval Academy, West Point, Coast Guard Academy as well. So I really encourage folks to take a look at the Falcon Foundation. They're making a monumental difference to, a lot of young men and women who, again, might need just a bit of a helping hand. And next thing you know, they're doing 30 years in the service and, having a lot of fun. So those would be my two recommendations, I guess: Tailwinds Ranch and Falcon Foundation.
Fantastic. Oh, Russ, thank you so much. I just want to say just a huge thank you really for joining me today for the Talk4 podcast. Beyond that as well, just a huge thank you for your service as well. Everything you did in the military and that great career, you inspired a lot of people. And, the thing about the Thunderbirds too, they see the jets and they don't always see the pilots. So it's sometimes maybe, I guess, a thankless business, but I can assure you that you had a great effect on a lot of young people coming into the military who are probably in the service right now too, doing that. And then just what you're doing now with your leadership and, essentially helping train the people who are going to be protecting the free world. It's an honorable career and you do great work. And it's a pleasure to have been able to speak to you today. So thank you.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Louis. Thanks for all that you're doing as well. Have a fantastic day, huh?
I will. Thank you guys for listening. This was episode 159. If you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. And if you'd like to listen in for the future ones as well, make sure to hit that subscribe button, spread some love, leave a like and a comment. Signing off for now. See you in the next one. Cheers.